What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 26 deadline. It's another Friday deadline this week, so this video is out a little bit earlier than normal. I'm recording it on Thursday afternoon. I've included any news and press conference information that we have, answered some of your questions, and gone through your benching headaches as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Let's get into it. So let's start with Cody Gakpo. Arne Slot actually held his press conference nice and early on Thursday morning, and he said he hopes Gakpo will be fit for Sunday's game against Man City, but it's going to be a close call. Now, if you've still got him in your team because you didn't get rid of him last week, I would really be looking to probably move him on. Even if he's available for that Man City game, it seems pretty unlikely that he's going to start. So that's another game with no minutes. If you've got a really good bench, then you could obviously use that instead and hope that Gakpo is back for game weeks 27 and 28 against Newcastle and Southampton at home. But even then, there's no guarantee that his minutes will be good. I suspect that he still is first choice left winger, but Jota's now started 2 games in a row. You've got Diaz that can play on the left as well. It just feels like a pretty good time to get rid of him, especially with that blank in 29. You're really relying on great minutes against Southampton in 28, and that's not guaranteed. If you're looking to bring in a new forward, I've said this before, Cunha if you're not free hitting in 29, Mateta if you are, they're probably the best 2 options, but any of kind of Visser, Beto, Marmoush if you want to take a punt are all nice as well. So for benching headaches this week, I've got all 3 Bournemouth midfielders at the top against Wolves at home. So Kluivert number 1 because of the penalties, then Utara playing number 9 at the moment, then Semenyo, and they're all ahead of Visser against Leicester away. You could definitely make the case that playing Leicester is better than playing Wolves, and I would agree with that. But the fact that it's an away game versus a home game is why I've put Visser slightly more down the list. Then Anthony Gordon, for those of you that have still got him in your squad. Nottingham Forest at home, not a bad fixture. If you wanted to keep him one more week, that is perfectly reasonable. And then Chris Wood against Newcastle away. I've said this many times before, I keep getting it wrong with Chris Wood, and it does feel like he's a little bit too far down this list considering he's on penalties. If you wanted to put him ahead of Gordon, ahead of Visser, absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. And you could possibly have him ahead of Utara and Semenyo as well, because neither of those 2 players are on penalties. Despite the underlying numbers for Chris Wood, he just keeps on scoring, and he's nailed, right? And the minutes are good as well. So you could definitely bump him further up this list if you wanted to. I've just gone for him a little bit lower because I think Newcastle away is tougher than all the fixtures that Bournemouth, Visser and Gordon have. Then Raul Jimenez against Palace at home. Then Rodgers against Chelsea at home. Spoken about Rodgers a bit this week. Perfectly reasonable to want to keep hold of him. I don't think it's the end of the world to have to play him against Chelsea. But I think with the other attackers they've bought now, like Rashford, Asensio, when they start getting up to full fitness, Rodgers might start getting reduced minutes slightly. Now, against Liverpool, he played the full game, and I don't think his starts are in question. But Unai Emery might have a few more players to pick from now, and maybe that means that Rodgers will be slightly less involved. Who knows, right? Either way, Chelsea at home, you can probably bump him quite far down the list, and out of all the attackers that were mentioned to me, he's the lowest one for me. Then defenders, fixture-wise, you could have Trent Alexander-Arnold at the bottom, especially if Erling Haaland ends up being fit, because Man City away is not an easy game to keep a clean sheet. But at the same time, if you've got Trent in your squad, it's always difficult to bench him. So I've put him at the top for that reason. Then Lewis Hall against Forest at home. Then Robinson and Castagna against Crystal Palace at home. You could argue that Palace at home is easier than Forest at home, but I just think Newcastle are a slightly stronger team than Fulham. That's why I've gone for Lewis Hall above. And actually, when you look at the underlying numbers, Lewis Hall is pretty attacking as well compared to Robinson and Castagna, who are no slouches, by the way, but I would just have Hall slightly above. And then Mykolenko at the bottom with Man United at home. The way Man United are playing right now, you could argue that Mykolenko should be above all those defenders, but I think on paper I'd probably still have him below the others. As always, if you've got 2 players on this list, whoever's higher up the list is who I would put in the 11. Most of these are quite close calls. If you've got a gut feeling one way or another, or you think I'm absolutely wrong, that's fine. Go with the one you think instead. Just a reminder, there's another £50 Amazon voucher up for grabs if you join the Let's Talk FPL Premier League Pick'em League over on Sleeper, which is completely free. You can do so using the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen. To be in with a chance of winning, all you have to do is predict whether it's going to be a home win, an away win, or a draw for each match in Game Week 25. Whoever gets the most predictions correct will win that voucher, and if it's a tie for the same number of correct predictions, I'll do a draw on the next deadline stream to determine the winner. So for my predictions, I'm actually going to go for a Brentford win, although that's partly because I'm too scared to go for Ruud van Nistelrooy, assistant manager. Everton versus Man United, I'm going to have to go for a draw. I usually back Man United, but I'm just not so sure at the moment. Bournemouth to beat Wolves, Arsenal to beat West Ham, definitely. Fulham versus Palace is a tough game to call. Palace have been pretty good away from home, but so are the fixtures they've played. I'm going to go for a Fulham home win. I think people are underestimating how good they've been this season. Spurs to beat Ipswich, Brighton to beat Southampton. Villa Chelsea, I'm going to go for a draw. And then Newcastle to beat Forest, despite how good Chris Wood is. And then Man City Liverpool. Tough game to call. Man City not been great this season. Liverpool top of the league. But I think it's a potential banana skin fixture. So I'm going to go for a draw. That is it. It's really quick and easy. Download the app using the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen and join my league and see if you can win that voucher. So let's get into some of your questions. Who are the best 3 forwards to move towards over the next few weeks before wildcard if you're not using free hit in game week 29? So if we think about the 3 forwards people will have if they are free hitting in 29, I reckon it'll be very popular to have Haaland at home to Brighton, Chris Wood away to Ipswich, and Cunha away to Southampton. Most people, I think, will play a 3-4-3 formation in game week 29 if they're free hitting. So they are probably the 3 forwards that you should be thinking about the most. But because we have the ability to save up to 5 free transfers now, there's not that need to necessarily start bringing in these players over the next couple of weeks. You can just move for them in game week 29 instead. If you're sat there with like Visser, Beto, Watkins, Isak, they're all perfectly fine to play over the next 2 to 3 weeks. You don't have to move early on any of these players. And in fact, with Haaland and Chris Wood in particular, obviously at the moment, Haaland has got a little bit of a knee problem. We'll wait and see what Pep Guardiola says in his press conference about that. But it's Liverpool at home in 26, so you don't need to move early for that. Even 28 is Forest away. There'll be no rush to get him. 29 is probably the week to do it. And it's similar with Chris Wood, right? If you don't already own him, it's Newcastle away, Arsenal at home, City at home, next 3. There's no rush to get him until game week 29. Cunha is probably the best option to bring in because of the next 3 fixtures before Southampton away in 29 and Bournemouth away, Fulham at home, Everton at home. But because you can save up transfers, there's probably no need to rush your 3 forwards out. And by the way, if you're lacking transfers and you can't bring some of those players in, like Beto is against West Ham at home in 29. If you've already got him in your team, he's fine to hold. If you've got someone like Visser against Bournemouth away, that's also absolutely fine. Most people probably don't have a huge amount of forwards from other teams, but I guess even Raul Jimenez, if he's still knocking about in some people's squads, it's Spurs at home in 29. It's not the worst fixture you could have. And before that, it's Palace at home, Wolves away, Brighton away. So don't feel just because I'm saying that Haaland, Chris Wood, Cunha are probably the best 3 for 29 means you absolutely have to have them. It doesn't. You might not have the transfers to make it work. So should I bring in Cunha or Kluivert this week if the other is coming in next week? I think purely based on fixture, you go for Kluivert. It's better to be playing Wolves at home than it is Bournemouth away. They're both on penalties. The minutes should be good for both of these players in game week 26 as well. So I would go for Kluivert this week, then Cunha next week. I think if you haven't got Cunha, it's perfectly reasonable to wait until game week 27. Likewise, if you're deciding between bringing in Nwaneri or Utara, Kluivert and Semenyo from Bournemouth, I still think the Bournemouth midfielders are better. Nwaneri is an excellent value pick, but long-term his minutes are definitely in question. And unless you're desperate for a player at 4.5, 4.6 million, I think you still go for Bournemouth. They look pretty good over the next 4 weeks. So is it worth taking a hit to change Unai Emery? And if so, who to? I see Unai Emery this week similar to Arne Slot in that I probably would take the hit to move them on. And it's not because I think Aston Villa can't get a result against Chelsea, because they absolutely can. But it wouldn't be a surprise if that game was a draw and there's no table bonus on offer. And it wouldn't be a complete shock if Chelsea won. Like, Villa are probably favourites going into that game because they're at home, right? And that makes a lot of sense. But if I didn't watch any football on Saturday and I checked in that evening to see the results and Chelsea had won, I wouldn't look at it and ask, how the hell did that happen, right? It's possible. And for that reason, with no table bonus, I think I would look to take a hit. And if I just show you this graphic again from Rob T FPL that I mentioned in the Game Week preview video, this is projected assistant manager points based on bookmakers odds. Unai Emery's quite low down. 4.9 points. Only Pep Guardiola, Ruben Amorim, Nuno and Graham Potter are below him. So it is quite a low potential there because it's Chelsea. No matter how Chelsea have played recently, it's still a fairly difficult game. At the top, you've got Arteta at 8.5. Now, some people will look at those points and say, well, if Unai Emery's 4.9 and you're taking a 4-point hit, that's 8.9, which is more than Arteta, so I should just keep Unai Emery. That's fine if you want to do that, but I would more look at the gap rather than whether it's exactly 4 points. And I'd rather just go for Arteta or one of those table bonus managers. The only thing I've slightly changed my mind on compared to earlier on in the week is before I kind of said, if I'm not taking a hit, I go safe, like Arteta, or maybe Iraola. And if I'm taking a hit, I'm definitely going to chase the table bonus. But I'm not so sure about that. Because if I'm chasing a table bonus manager, I'm going into that thinking if I get a draw, that's good. And a draw for a table bonus manager is very similar to a win for a non-table bonus manager. So I think in that case, I just take the more likely chance of getting something, which is a strong team like Arsenal against West Ham at home. So because I'm moving slot to Arteta, probably, I haven't done it yet, I might change my mind, but that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm pretty sure I would move Unai Emery to him as well. But if you want to chase table bonus, I've spoken about this a lot this week. Glasner against Fulham away, McKenna against Spurs at home, or Ruud van Nistelrooy at home to Brentford are probably the best options. Palace the strongest team, but they've got the most difficult fixture. So I'd probably go Glasner, but I think I'm going to play it ultra safe. I actually put a tweet out yesterday that said, I don't mind a pack of ready salted crisps and a meal deal. That's the kind of person I am, so I'm happy to go with a boring choice for manager. But to come back to the original question, would I move Emery on for a hit? Probably, but I don't see it as a no-brainer. So if you're worried about doing it and you want to keep hold of him and use that transfer elsewhere and not take a points hit, absolutely fine. So I've got Iraola assistant manager from last week. Is it worth removing him to get Glasner or another table bonus manager in? In this case, I think I'd rather save the transfer. Like, Wolves at home is a pretty good fixture. If Slot had that same fixture, I don't think I would be looking to get rid of him this week. And I know Bournemouth aren't as strong as Liverpool, but they're still very good. They'll still be favourites for that game. So I don't think it's worth the transfer. I do get the desire to chase table bonus because it could be a huge score. But in this case, I think you just play for the safe win and just hope that it happens. And I was chatting to Praz last night and he made a really good point, actually. He said that so far, the popular managers, Moyes in 24, Unai Emery in 25, for those people that didn't go slot, have only won or drawn so far. Once we get a table bonus manager that actually loses, people might not be so confident chasing that table bonus. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. If you think that Ipswich are going to beat Spurs or have got a very good chance at a draw, or the same for Leicester versus Brentford, or the same for Glasner versus Fulham, you should definitely go for it. But in this case, you've already got a pretty strong manager. So I'd like you just keep hold of Iraola, use that transfer somewhere else. So what should we do with Bruno Fernandes? He feels like an awful pick now that he's often playing a deeper role, but him having a good fixture in game week 29 makes it hard to spend a transfer on him. So I do get the frustration. I think at the moment, because of the amount of injuries that Man United have, it's hard to know how quickly he's going to go into a more advanced role. And just because he's playing a little bit deeper doesn't mean he never gets forward. But obviously if he's playing alongside someone like Casemiro or Ugarte, there is more defensive work than if you're playing as one of those number 10s. So it is a bit of an issue for FPL. This is what I would say. If you've got the transfers to sell him and still put out a good team in 29 if you're not free hitting, then go ahead. There's a lot of good midfielders right now that are probably going to cause you less frustration. Likewise, if you've got a setup with, say, Fernandes in midfield and Njai up front, and you can do something like Fernandes to Kluivert or Nwaneri, someone like that, and then Njai to Cunha, that also feels like two pretty good transfers that also set you up nicely for game week 29 as well. So I think you can sell him in those situations. If you're struggling for transfers and you've just got injured players, suspended players, whatever it might be to get rid of, and Fernandes is just not high up the priority list, I think you just keep hold of him. It's not fun owning him right now. But Man United, as bad as they've been, do have Everton, which is going to be tough, but Everton, Ipswich and Leicester next 4. He's still nailed on. He's still on penalties. All it takes is for someone like Garnacho to go down, Bruno Fernandes to play awful, but he still gets points, right? Because he then goes and scores the penalty. I think he's okay to hold on to. And there's no way I'll be buying him right now. But there are going to be situations where it just makes sense for you to keep hold of him. And I know people watching this will just say, just take a hit, get rid of him, and be done with it. But I'm not sure about that narrative. I'm not sure that's how I would play it. So if you've got the transfers or you can make a double move to improve 2 positions at once, that seems pretty good. But for some of you, unfortunately, it's probably going to be worth just keeping hold of him and maybe just reassessing week to week. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast, and make sure to get your predictions submitted for the Premier League Pick'em game over on Sleeper, and join the Let's Talk FPL League to be in with a chance of winning that voucher. I've not talked about my team in this video because ultimately it's exactly the same as the team selection yesterday. Probably moving to Arteta, probably doing Rodgers to Utara, but anything different and anything from the press conferences today, I will cover in the deadline stream later on, which starts at 4:30 PM UK time, right up until the deadline at 6:30. So I'll catch you then.